Welcome to Launch Code, a premier business podcast, starring Evan Hafer, Matt Best, and Jared Taylor.
Okay, well, welcome to Launch Code Podcast with the one, the only, Mike Glover from Fieldcraft Survival. How's it going, man?
It's going great, man. Thanks for having me on again.
Dude, this is round two. I'm excited because it's been over a year since we've had you on. Sounds like you might have somebody else there too.
Yeah, it's one of my guys. He usually works under the table, and so I got him tooling on stuff below me.
Good, exactly, man. How the hell has it been? Because I follow you guys. Obviously, you and I talk. I don't know, every other month. It seems like probably every 3 or 4 months. It seems like Fieldcraft is doing awesome, man. And since the last time that we talked a ton about management and leadership, a few of these other things. But it seems like you're busier than one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest.
Well, looks can be deceiving because our company is, we're doing great. But as you know, like we have our conversation last week, it's just a new, like in the evolution, it's a new set of problems that just, evolve every single day. And it's all problems that I'm thankful for. I mean, I'm not going to ever say that it's unexpected. And so I'm just happy to have those problems, but it's definitely a challenge, a new level of challenge. It's next level challenge. That's it.
Yeah. Can you talk about some of those challenges that you faced in the last couple of years, some of those that maybe stick out in general terms and where some of the listeners might be able to get a sense of what you've been going through?
Yeah. We had the conversation last week about it. And, I even posted about it recently about having employees now, because before, when you're an entrepreneur and you have just yourself to worry about, or maybe your friend, or maybe your spouse, or whatever it may be, it's so small that if everything, falls apart, it's no loss, no harm, no foul. I'll just go back to contracting and being in the Thousandaire Club. But now with employees, you have a new responsibility where, all the burden falls on your shoulders, and you are literally handling and taking care of these people's lives, and they're looking at you through that lens. So that's a huge new problem set that I've never experienced. And even in my mom's business and growing up, seeing her operate, it was just really her. She was self-employed. But to have employees is definitely a new challenge. And then with that challenge, obviously, it's not just having employees, but it's the kind of the complications that evolve when you're trying to diversify to grow to the next level, which is kind of like the problem sets that we're in now.
Yeah, and we were talking about it. It's interesting because I think a lot of entrepreneurs entering into business or being self-employed, they have an idea of where they want this to go. They think about the end result. Maybe it's, working for yourself. I'm gonna have more freedom. I'm gonna start this business. But all the little things that go into starting a business, sometimes they overlook or they don't have the correct amount of insight before you're already in it. You're in the middle of it and you're like, holy fuck, I got to try to figure this out. And I think you and I talked about that the last week. So all those little things now, and talk a little bit about what you deal with, because you guys have such a diverse, channel offering. When I say that, you guys monetize through several different ways, and now you're syncing all of those things and you're managing all those people. What are some of the things that you didn't think about that have come up in the last year? They're like, man, I wish I would have thought that through a little bit better.
Yeah, when we look at most of the things that we plan out, it's really simple, because we kind of do like a 5-paragraph op order, and we kind of define, definitively what we understand is going to be the plan based on our information or based on our experience. But we forget that that's not our operating realm. Like we don't operate in that space. So when it comes to business, we often start a plan with not understanding the complexities of growth. And that's the biggest challenge that I'm facing is, hey, when you get to a threshold in people and infrastructure, even in your market share, how do you diversify? And then one of the big challenges that I'm having is like, okay, so you've almost capped out your direct to consumer sales. I mean, you've maxed that out. And so now it's time to diversify, and distribution is a whole other genre of business that I always heard the term loosely, like, hey, you just get into distribution and you start distributing your product. But I didn't realize the amount of knowledge, experience, and then kind of like the understanding of what it's going to take to get to that level. So a lot of people, like, they start out with a tactical business, for example, and then, it's a recipe. It's already mapped out. You could basically outline exactly the end state of that business and as far as you're going to go. Well, if you plan to grow outside of a small business with you just teaching courses and selling hats and t-shirts, then you have to diversify. And so what we're very good at is having a lot of contingencies and then having our hands in different elements of the same space, which I think is survival. And now the challenge is, now how do we evolve in each one of those spaces? And that's the complexity that I'm dealing with, is like, hey, I have an inside the waistband tourniquet holster. Well, yeah, you can sell direct consumer and make a couple thousand a month, but how are you going to make a couple million a year in a distribution plan?
Right. I think a lot of guys don't, to include myself, like I've been direct to consumer, 98% of our business is direct to consumer. I haven't even played with the distribution aspect of the business because it's so cumbersome, and it takes a lot in order to even understand it. Then it's a minefield of brokers too, right? So you have these brokers out there in our space, in the food and beverage space. You don't know who you can trust, who's going to be a legitimate salesman, who's going to, carry forth your product and actually get you to scale. And you might have to try 3 or 4 of these guys on before anything comes to fruition. Have you experienced some of the same things in that, or has it been more of just trying to get into distribution?
Yeah, I think I've faced both challenges because, for example, in our space where you have like a large 2A community and patriots or veterans, however you define it, there's a lot of like people want stuff like USA made, for example.
Right.
And then you realize when you operate in the space that if you did USA made, you would literally go out of business really fast because there would be no margin to make. Right. And then people are like, well, who cares about the margin? Well, if you're trying to feed families for your employees, then you care about the margin. Yeah. And so that's one of the challenges. And like you described, I mean, the operating entities of the manufacturing industries, they all know each other. And there's all these relationships that are built because that's what they do for a living. And so when you try to come in there, if you haven't bridged the right relationships, you're the outcast, and then you have to prove yourself. And they look at you like, my big challenge is I'm so small that when they look at me for manufacturing, they're like, oh, you want me to produce a couple thousand? Like, oh, we have guys that produce a couple million. Yeah, we'll get to you when we get to you. So you're not a priority.
Right. And
so we faced that in all the relationships we built. And when I've realized, it's kind of like, me and you, we're so busy that when we do interact, we there's a lot that comes from that conversation or that engagement. Well, if you want to bridge these gaps with these manufacturing companies, you have to fly to them. Right. And you have to sit down with them at a table, build a rapport, do the handshakes, because if you think you're going to do it in a e-commerce space, a handshake over an email, it's not going to work out that way.
Right. Yeah, it takes a lot. I was literally just in Dallas yesterday, as a matter of fact, talking to a distributor, and you don't know. That's the other issue is like, and a lot of people are like, well, BlackRifle, it's a bigger company. I'm like, yeah, man, I got my salesman shoes on and, tucked in my shirt and put on a blazer and flew out to Dallas, which is 45 minutes away. I went to their office, sat down at their table, and with a Pelican case full of products going, I really want you guys to sell these things. Mm-hmm. And that's what it takes. You have to be a salesman too, on top of the fact that you're, and I hear exactly what you're saying. the manufacturing aspect. And when we take a look at even our products, when I say that, because we're in two totally different product worlds, I tried to find, and I still have, a double-walled stainless steel option for our customers that was manufactured in the United States. There isn't one. So, I get this complaint a lot where people go, man, I got this thermos and it was made overseas. And I'm like, man, I wish I had a double-wall stainless steel thermos option for you, but there is not one manufacturer in the United States left for a vacuum sealed double-wall thermos. I can't get one. It doesn't exist. And even then, they're like, well, you should start one.
Yeah,
I just kind of
millions of dollars. Yeah,
I'm like, you just kind of have to laugh. You're like, man, I would price myself out of business by trying to, like, I'm going to stand up a manufacturing facility just so I can sell, $10,000-$15,000 worth of thermoses a year. Dude, that's not what I can do. But I can just find the best product for you. But like, getting back to what you're kind of dealing with is, you wear how many hats, right, in your company right now? How many hats are you wearing?
Oh, it's funny because I make this I make the same analogy from being in special forces. When we were on the teams, even as a sergeant major, I'm in there sweeping the damn hallway,
Right.
because if it has to be done, it has to be done. And so when I come into work, if trash needs to be taken out and I walk by it, I'm not going to depend on an employee to do that if it needs to be done. So I'm doing it myself. And so, sales, it's like that. It's like that commercial where the dude is working out of his garage and he gets a phone call. And he's like, sales department. And she's like, yeah, can I speak to somebody in human resources? And he's like, yeah, please hold. And he picks up the phone and he goes, human resources. It's the same exact thing. So, I mean, I do most of the marketing for the company because I have the efficiency built in because of the experience. And I've worked myself out of certain hats and roles, but I constantly find myself coming back and forth and checking or being involved. Because when you own a company and it's just you have to be able to manage and facilitate every process. So, dude, I thought being a sniper on a recce detachment and being the JTAC at the same time while being the 18 Bravo was difficult. Owning your own company, I mean, you're wearing every hat.
Well, and two, you're managing multiple aspects of your business, which you touched on. You're an influencer, so you're also, directing your brand, and you're, posting on a regular basis for your company because you're an influencer for your company. You guys just moved, right? So, you guys moved from where, Colorado to Arizona?
Yep.
So in every aspect of this too, you've got your training courses, and I would imagine that you're still the primary on a lot of your training courses too, right?
I am. And so here's one thing which interesting is one thing that I always thought was smart of your company and the way that you laid it out. Because I remember the early days when you didn't have it and you were building it. Mm-hmm. One big mistake that I made was I made myself the company early on. And so when it came to the brand, it's like Mike Glover was the brand.
Right.
And so I spent the last year kind of trying to deflect myself and then focus on pushing the brand to be standalone. When you had that from the beginning, where it was like, who the hell? Oh, Matt Best doesn't own BlackRifle Coffee. Like it. So it's like, who's Evan? Who's that dude?
Right.
That I wish I did that up front, because a lot of my peers in the space. You guys got trains with BlackRifle Coffee now? Did you guys just buy a train?
No, it's our coffee truck. It has a train horn on it. So Edwin's out in the parking lot honking it. Sorry.
That's awesome. So yeah, you like when I see one of the biggest mistakes I see is guys will stand up a company and they're maybe, and I'm speaking about our genre of people, mm-hmm. They're special operations guys. So they have already the good recipe with content to drive a spike and kicking off their business on the right foot. But then they glue themselves to the brand.
Right.
And then if they became irrelevant or they stepped away from it, they would have no branding itself.
Right.
And so one of the things I've been trying to do is for the last year, step away as far as I can. But what I've realized is our sales plummet when I step away. So now I'm trying to diversify to this distribution plan so it can stand alone. So I
Right.
don't have to be the brand exclusively.
What and kind of the analogy that I pointed out, and a lot of people use this, is like, yeah, you got a lot of spinning plates. Because I've dealt with some of those things. I mean, a lot of the same things you're talking about, where I'm like, the business at times feels like you're being drawn and quartered, between your family, your employees, your business, your content, your sales. Like, you've got so many divisions that you're over. You're stretched so thin. How do you prioritize your time? Like, how are you prioritizing your time and digging in and figuring out what you can realistically cover down on? Because I would imagine that's a big deal for you.
Yeah, I go pretty old school with that. I've just like we're in a patrol base. I focus on the priorities of work.
Yeah.
And what I do every morning is typically I'll make a checklist, and in that checklist, I'll prioritize the top 3 things that are like nothing else matters besides these 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, the priorities built off the value. So if it's something like, hey, conference call with Evan, I'm literally putting that at the top of the list because it's going to provide the most value. And so when I reshuffle the deck, yeah, I might be blowing off somebody who's really important in the space, but it's of lesser value when compared to talking to you about business. So, I literally make my guys, George, for example, he's still an active duty master sergeant. I mean, he's
Wow.
on terminal leave, double tapping. But we make lists every single morning and then tackle the top priority list. And if we don't get to everything, that's okay. But as long as we've accomplished and completely, tackled that top objective and completed it all the way through, then I'm satisfied. Because I think what happens is when people get task saturated, they give a little love to each individual thing, but never really truly complete full circle any of the task.
Right.
And it kind of gives the impression that they're not squared away, or gives the impression or illusion that things aren't happening like they should. And I get probably I don't know how you manage it, but I get like 100 messages a day. And then even prioritizing text for me is something that I have to do. And I get to people and like, hey man, I apologize. I had 50 texts in front of yours. And, a week later, I'm getting back to people with just basic responses. Yeah. So it's a struggle, but it's, I try to go old school with it.
No, it's the same. For me, it's the same exact thing. Like, every morning I have to start my day off with a checklist, which is typically, items are, I have some things on my list of tasks that have been on there for 6 months, but they continue to stay at the bottom because there's just not enough time. Yep. And priorities continue to shift and develop, and things evolve to the point where they'll get done, but they don't need to get done today. And they continue to get pushed down. And some of them slide off the list. I'll go back through and I'll audit it, and I'll just start sliding those things off the list because it's like, it's just never going to happen. I'll start punting those over to different people. I drew the analogy, for me at least, was for business, and when you've got so many different things going on, it's the time triage, because really it's almost like looking at a mass casualty event sometimes in your business. It's not everything is not a catastrophe, but you can only save certain aspects of it, and you can only do so many things. Yeah. And you have to start just going to work on the aspects of your business that will survive, right? And then you have to leave some of the others that that's never going to come to fruition, or if it does, it's not going to reap the fruit that this one will. And I think that's a struggle for every entrepreneur, is just, how do I prioritize my time? And I've struggled with that so many times, man, like throughout the last 5 years, where it's not only running checklists, it's being realistic for myself too, because you also have a family and you have a business. And I've tried to explain this to my spouse, where the business is what provides us groceries, so that's kind of a big priority. And
Yeah.
are you balancing that? Are you finding your relationship is fruitful, or does it cost you some hours with your family too?
Yeah, it's real difficult for me to balance that because I always it's not that I put the business first, because at the end of the day, um, the business can burn down to the ground. As long as, the people around me are taken care of, they're
Right.
safe and everything's good, it's good. But when you look at the investment, the amount of, blood, sweat, and tears, for lack of a better analogy, that you've invested into it, you always have to nurture it. And so even when I'm off, I'm not really off. And I don't think I
Right.
consciously remember in the last 3 years, really a period of time where I had checked out, because there was never really the opportunity to check out. And so the balance for me is kind of, setting aside the time and then being a good steward of maintaining the sanctity of that time,
Right.
and going, hey, I'm putting down my phone. We're going to go out and we're not going to do anything business related or work related. Or I'm going to have dinner and I'm going to be with family and friends, and I'm not going to pick up my phone and
Right.
check the 100 messages that I know are right there on the edge.
Right.
And that's the biggest struggle that I've had is when I'm off, it's not really off because I'm just doubling down on the work
Right.
when I return to work. And so I know any time off is basically time where I'm just going to be overloaded with work.
Right.
So I'm trying to strike that real good balance. And I would say, obviously having employees helps a lot because they take a lot of that workload off. But what I've realized is, and you're the same way, I know it, is when you offload some portion of your workload, you find a good reason to justify implementing another element
Right.
to free up to occupy that free time that you just gave up.
That's so true, man. Like when one of my first hire at BlackRifle was at 366 days, literally, after I'd started the company. Before that, it was just me and my wife for the first year, and then employee number one, and I couldn't afford it either. Like I couldn't afford hiring him, but I couldn't afford not to hire him either.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in that purgatory of, well, I have to hire somebody because there's just no way I can sustain 20 hours a day. There's just like I'm burning myself into the ground. Now my wife's getting burnt. And so when I hired my first employee, he went into just customer service to help me with this customer service. And it was such a massive psychological relief to know that I could wake up the next morning and not have, 150 emails in my inbox that you have to get to. Like there's just like no ifs, ands, or buts about it, dude. Like you got to get to those. Those are your customers. Those are the people that keep the lights on, So just having that one guy, like, next to me, and we rode the same desk too in my first facility. We shared the same desk. And dude, it was such a huge relief. And I remember after like a month of having him, and he's still with BlackRifle today, which is awesome. Thank you, Charles, because you're great, and I love you to death. Man, it was such a big deal for me, but I did exactly that, which was instead of taking the time that gave me, I filled it with something that took like twice as much more time, right? And so
Exactly.
Yeah. So I don't know. Have you, thinking back on your business and the people that you've hired, who's helped you the most as far as like the positions that you've been able to fill, expand your capabilities as a businessman?
I think, just like you said, when you give up that tasking and then you partition the growth, or when you partition the space with something else, it leads to growth.
Right.
And so it's like, you only have so many hours of the day that are allocated. And it's like, how do you navigate that time consideration to benefit the company the most.
Right.
And so what I've realized is, for example, Kydex. We're not huge in Kydex. I mean, we're not big in the space.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember, I think it was earlier this year. It was like right when we moved to Prescott. It was in June. I said, hey, what about Kydex? I mean, we're doing everything every day carry. We're briefing it. We have the EDC mat. We have the tourniquet stuff. Why don't we talk about doing like just a low vis holster, a standard holster that I use in contracting?
Yeah.
And why don't we implement that? And then it was like, how much is the equipment? It's like $2,000. So I'm like, well, okay, let's see if it works and let's put it out there. And then we realized we had a market. And so the first thing I did was go, okay, well, I can't grind Kydex because I got everything else to do. Let's hire a Kydex guy.
Right.
And so we hired 2 Marines that are grunts that are really good at Kydex. And when we did that, it gave us basically a manufacturing process to where we can go, hey, here's a concept, here's a prototype, make it, and then we'll sell it. And then we could show the proof of concept and then show the entire process being made, which is obviously good for content for social media.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, we have a diversification of the company that is making money that's standalone. And so, I mean, it could be its own company itself. And so what I've realized is partitioning all these duties and roles, and you have to look at it as a CEO, like, hey, is this person or is this process going to make me money? And if it does and it fits in your genre, then when you commit to it, and then show you'll see the benefits displayed. And I think as long as I have doers and I keep doers around me, which I'm surrounded by, then I know we'll be okay. And, if one thing falls off or one process falls off, then I can navigate these guys into another realm of diversification where I know the company will sustain life. And so it's kind of a security blanket, for lack of better terminology.
I completely agree with that. I think, what I took from, the previous profession and SF, and what I felt really good and comfortable with was choosing the right people, like guys that, and the whole process of, selection and the Q course and a few of these other things like that. What that does for you, it's not just the fact that it, builds this incredible amount of confidence and, the physical aspects of it, and you get selected and all these other things. Like that's one thing, but what you can identify, I think, more importantly from that is you understand people, and then people that are mission focused that you can continue to repurpose. When I say that, as a team, you continue to have to adapt and evolve, right? It's like, one day, man, just because you're the Bravo doesn't mean that you're not going to have to work on somebody, or you're not going to have to make comms, or you're not going to have to do X, Y, and Z. And I think one of the things that I'm eternally grateful for in my service is being able to identify people that are kind of the jack of all trades type. That's like, I know this guy will bust ass. I know their metal is just like hammered steel, and we can continue to adapt and improvise and evolve. And I think that that's one of the greatest gifts that I took from there, besides obviously all the other experience, was just being able to spend time with amazing men that were so much better than me in every regard, where it's like, oh, this is what greatness looks like. Awesome. Okay, well, I can take that, and hopefully I can be a better judge of people's character and their ability to put out great work.
Yep.
And I think you've got more experience in SF, and talking about the planning process and not only your selection, but what are you looking for in the guys that you hire? So when you bring somebody in for an interview, do you have? I know you got it. I know you got your top 3 criteria, and you've got to have those things. And what are you looking for when you're even hiring people?
I think that, just like you said, even when I was a team sergeant and I had a whole bunch of different personalities, I became very good at manipulating behavior to benefit the team.
Right.
And so you couldn't treat one person like you could another because their incentives were completely different,
Mm-hmm.
and their experiences were different. So I like guys or gals or people for the company that are adaptable, that are shapeable, that are, I tell my Kydex guys, I'm like, if we do this right, you'll be managing and running the company in 5 years, because I want you to be able to see all the processes. So I literally make my guys do PT. I make them do cross training.
Right.
I give them blocks of instruction on mindset, because I want them to understand, not even as a Kydex guy, but as a man, that there's more value here in the company, and it has a lot to do with the military experiences that we've had, which is, you're not learning just to be a commando, you're learning to be a better human being.
Right.
And so when I interview somebody, I stay away from conventional mindsets. I stay away from conventional ways of thinking, because some people, it could be taught. They could be flexible. They could say, let's get through it, let's do it. But a lot of people, because of the complacency that they live in their pattern of life, are very uncomfortable with any change. And when you're working with a company like Fieldcraft, we change every single day. And there might be processes that are repeatable, but the way that you navigate those processes might change. And I want guys to be able to think outside the box. And so if they're conventional in ways of thinking, if they're rigid, I don't like that. I want people to hey, one day you're going to be doing Kydex. The next day I might have you AI in on a flat range,
Right.
and helping me out in a flat range. So we kind of look, for these kind of wear all hats kind of guys, kind of like team guys. But also, I want people who show up to this company to know that there is an evolutionary process in the company to be able to start from the bottom and work their way to the top. Because, a lot of companies, especially in the tactical / Kydex game, it's like there's an expectation like, hey, I'm grinding Kydex, I'll be here for 20 years.
Right.
Like, I want to hire the guy who's capable of being a manager or a leader, but knows that he has to start at the bottom and work his way up in the hierarchy.
Yeah. And how important, because you guys have such a prominent culture. And I mean, at least from, my perspective looking in, your culture's, you're building a tribe, and you built a tribe. You've been really successful at it. So how important is translating your culture to the people that work for Fieldcraft? How are you doing that on a regular basis besides the PT and a few of those other things?
Yeah, I think here's what the tactic that I've utilized is, I want everybody who does anything for the company to be a marketeer for the company.
Right.
Meaning I want them to be able to sell what they're doing and anything that the company's doing via whatever network, whether it's social media, word of mouth. And they have to be able to be the sales pitch first and foremost, because as content providers, I want them to be able to educate. And the messaging is important, because the mismessaging or disinformation that could take place in delivering the wrong message could literally mean the difference between a client versus somebody who's just completely opposed to everything we're doing.
Right.
And my mission statement from the get-go has always been, if I could take the liberal American who's not interested in anything in the tactical / medical / survival space, and make them feel more comfortable with coming out of their environment and going, oh, these guys aren't egotistical. I'm open-minded to hear what they have to say. Then we're capturing the potential to influence a demographic that is really against everything that we're doing. And so we're not just, we're not market sharing with one sliver of the demographic that goes to SHOT Show.
Right.
We're actually going to the overland spaces, going to the outdoor expos, and able to influence it. So if these guys who are working on the Kydex can kind of bridge the communication gap with the people that they're communicating to, and on top of doing their job, finishing Kydex, then I think they're full circle. They're able to communicate it. They're able to do it. and then send that message to that person who might not be otherwise interested in what we're doing.
Well, and do you guys have, I'm sure you do you have your mission statement for Fieldcraft?
Yep. Yeah, we absolutely do. We have our mission statements on the front page of our website, but it's, to educate, equip, and train civilians and citizens who want to be better prepared for the worst case scenario.
Right.
And that's kind of been the staple since the beginning. It's slightly evolved, but I think it's retained its message from the beginning.
Yeah, and this is one thing that I do, and I don't know if you do it, but I continue to put people back into the mission statement. Like, here's the mission of Black Rifle Coffee. We serve coffee and culture to people that love America, and this is what we do. We serve them, and I'm refocusing and focusing the mission statement, I think, every month, and we do a lot of all hands. Are you guys tracing that mission statement back? There's two parts to this question, which is, your mission statement, how important is it to the company? How often are you using it? And then, are you still using, I noticed you say the 5-paragraph op order, but are you still using a lot of your MDMP principles that you've used in the past?
Yeah, absolutely, I am. So, our mission statement, and this is for any business, and the advice element of this, I think it's very important to stay focused on the mission statement, which is the original intent, unless you want to, if we're fragoing and changing the mission statements, then it needs to be definitive or deliberate change.
Right.
And then that information or communication needs to be disseminated to be able to affect the action that's going to be able to shape that change in the future for the business. Because what I have seen as an error in myself is I like to be real creative, and I like to innovate practices wherever I could see them, and that's from everyday life to what we're putting out in information. So if I'm doing anything in that realm, I can go down rabbit holes, and then I depend on my VPs or my VP to keep me in line with that. And so what I like to do is I do the same thing I do like in all hands when I feel like I'm kind of people are losing the understanding, because it's that feel good kind of restart that people need to have that re-engagement to go, what's the newest priorities, or what, rehash my duties and responsibilities. So we'll come together, recommunicate the mission statement, and then immediately delineate what those individuals' duties and responsibilities are to make that happen. And I think it's really important to revisit and I know we had the conversation before where you did military decision-making process, MDMP,
right,
and then established the paragraphs and subparagraphs to make your business successful, and you had to revisit that. And I think that's hugely important to stay focused on your 2, 5, and 10-year plan. Because if you're not kind of visionary and objectively focused for that 2 and 5-year plan, you'll never meet that timeline, which is what I failed to do my first year, where then I got the end of my first year and went, whoa, I'm nowhere near where I need to be for the 2-year. We got to restart this whole damn thing over again. And so, like you said, having that mission focus and revisiting it is an integral part to my business, and I think business success overall.
Well, it's something that I've revisited with vigor. And it was something that, talking to Jocko a couple months ago, I realized, and I'd kind of gotten not a little bit off course, but I was a lot more reactive in the company, and we were talking about 5-paragraph op word, and I was talking about the military decision-making process, and I was talking about all these different things. And he was talking about how he goes into companies and talks to them about these specific things. And I was like, man, I need to be talking more about these things even in my own company. I need to be talking about, how important it is to trace, from our mission statement, be able to draw those things out and look at different courses of action, go through a process that's more institutional. And the other piece to this was the 5-paragraph op order is a beautiful thing. And I think it is for most of us, right? It's an institutional way of putting information out that uniformly is understood, right? Mm-hmm. And we've been using it so much for so long, and privates understand it, well, the aspects of it that they need to. I kind of revisit it in our business, and I'm really interested to hear guys their take on the 5-paragraph op board and how much are they using it and integrating it into their business. Are you using that same template, or kind of are you modifying it now in your business to fit your business more effectively?
Well, I think there has to be a modification of it, right? Because when we talk about situation, mission, execution, service support, command and signal, what is hugely important is the modification of business and service support and command and signal and how it relates to meeting the mission statement. Mm-hmm. And what I've realized is, even in building relationships, like, I was never good. It's not that I wasn't good at it, because when I was engaged with people, I'm very good at the engagement when I'm engaged. Mm-hmm. But I'm not the one that likes to go forward and go, hey, let's make this thing happen as a person. So I had to really, define what I wanted to meet as an objective. And I'll tell you, I just recently did this where I remodified my command and signal. And I literally remember writing out where I said, basically, if you want to build the relationships, you have to commit the time. Mm. And so I realized that as an individual, I had to take myself out of my own comfort zone in order to bridge that relationship gap to get to the next level. So if I wanted to distribute, I had to do, the round robins to the mom and pop stores in Phoenix and talk to the gun stores and talk to the managers. And I just did it. But that was a modification, because the original intent was to rely on other people in the company that were better at it to do it themselves. Mm-hmm. But I realized that, hey, that's a responsibility or of onus that I have to take on myself. And so when I look at service support, command and signal, I think definitively in the 5-paragraph op order, they have to have the most adaptable and creative change in meeting your overall mission statement in order to be successful.
I would absolutely agree. I'm evolving on it and continuing to evolve on the concepts from, the military and then in business, and then I'll think about something. I'm like, oh, you know what, that fits really well here. I'm gonna have to put this in this section. And I think, for me, having that structure of thought and even talking to the guys in the company about it, they're like, oh yeah, that does make a lot of sense, man. So we're doing, situation. We're looking at, the total addressable market or something like that. And we're looking at the competition, and we're assessing what's happening before. And we're looking at the battlefield, so to speak, or the marketplace, right? And we're looking at our sales channel, and we're talking about all of these things, and having that context is so important, I think, for translating over our experience into business and thinking about it and then drawing those parallels. It becomes really important. For me, it's been a very fruitful endeavor for me to be able to think about our past, structure that information, and then execute on it over here in the business world. And I found myself, I called Jeff the other day, which, Jeff Kirkham. Yeah. I was like, hey man, because we built this, mission, it was a mission planning guide, basically, a commander's planning guide. That's what it was. We drew it up like 10 years ago. It's like, hey, can you send me that thing? I want to go through this again and just kind of think about where I was 10 years ago and try to modify it for today. And he's like, yeah, dude, I'll send it over to you. And, you as a sergeant major, I would imagine, like, that's got to be an ever-present thing for you. Like, you can't even get out of that. It's so ingrained into your DNA.
Yeah. I think I'm constantly looking at it, and I think the most important tool that I've understood from kind of like the structured element of whether it's MDMP or 5-paragraph, the ability to disseminate a lot of shit, a lot of information, and to be able to break down. I mean, I'll tell you, most of my time isn't spent at that level of detailed planning. Most of the time I'm briefing scheme of maneuver, because when it comes to articulate, like, most of my guys are Marines. I got 3 Marines that work for me. And so they understand the 5-paragraph op order, but they mostly understand the mild vagueness of scheme of maneuver of like, hey, this is the concept. But then them understanding how to operate in that 5-paragraph, they could make and create their own plan internally to be able to make things happen at the scheme of maneuver level. So I find myself most often, even in business, briefing the scheme of maneuver, which people don't understand, that it's the basic gist of the plan without complicating the communication with details like you would in a detailed op order or operations order.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'll come back into that and I'll brief execution in a level of detail that harkens back to like, phase 1 or something for us. Because especially if we're doing like a highly complex event where I want a specific outcome. Okay, so you're going to stand, your left foot's going to stand on that curb. I want your right hand on your right hip. And like, people are going, what the fuck? Like, Jesus, man, and I'm like, hey dude, I want nothing to be of question, because if I want a certain outcome, I have to brief it at that level. Right. So if it's not necessarily, if the end result is more important than the meat, then I'll say, here's your scheme, but I'm less concerned if your left or your right foot's on that fucking, bumper or whatever it is. I think it'd be interesting, man, kind of go into what you guys do. 'Cause like you guys have some really cool things that you're doing. So like lay it all out, what you guys do. 'Cause it's fucking cool.
So, the company mainly is partitioned into 3 elements. The big one, for us, monetization wise, is the products that we develop. And, we don't have a lot of products, and I've scaled products the slowest because, as you know, as a business owner, when you're doing anything from ground up, it requires a lot of capital. And so one thing I want to just make clear is we are a debt-free company. We've operated in the green since day one because I took some good contracting money, put it to good use, and then we've been green since day 0. And so equipment is slow scale, but it's the biggest moneymaker for us. The segments off of that are training and media. In training, the idea is we like to be able to teach everybody with what we have, or at least point somebody in the right direction of the equipment that we brief. So if I'm teaching a class on EDC carry, everyday carry, and I could reference them to a good piece of equipment that I don't carry or that I do carry, I want to keep it turnkey for them. I want to provide the solutions for the training that we're providing. We do everything from training for everyday carry to carbine. We're doing a Go Rigs and Rifles course, which is a course that involves people utilizing their everyday mobility platform, whether it's a Jeep Cherokee or a freaking Subaru. They could show up. We go overlanding. We talk about survival considerations, and then they learn how to defend themselves from their vehicle with their truck gun or their everyday carry, which is a unique, obvious opportunity for people to actually shoot their guns live from their actual vehicles. And then we also have seminars that we do. We have seminars called survival seminars where we invite the public to come, and we have them 60 people at a time because that's our capacity at the shop. We teach them about survival psychology, teach them about survival mindset, and then give them kind of takeaways. I call it tangible takeaways of things that they could take away and introduce into their life and assist them in being better prepared. Part of our training apparatus now is we're partnered with North American Rescue. So we're doing a lot of, we have a vehicle trauma response kit. We have an enhanced trauma response kit for the mass casualty or your family. And then we have the BHRK, which is the individual IFAC for stop the bleed. And so, basically full spectrum and everything preparedness. And then on the other side of that, we have media. We just did, you guys were the title sponsor for our last event, which was in the Overland Border Run / Toy Drive, where we drove down to the Mexican border and we utilized these opportunities in media to talk about relevant things that are going on in our society that are relevant in the realm of preparedness and security. I mean, the border situation as it's tied to national security is very important for people to understand the ground truth,
right,
which is what we actually see and experience by being on the border. So we did that, and then we drove on the way home. We diverted and delivered about $4,000 worth of toys to Toys for Tots in California, and then we returned to base. We RTB'd. So, in the media spectrum, we'll continue to do those kind of things to drive content, but also some kind of tie-in with identifying a potential problem as we see it, and also a give back of, donating. We're big on giving back to the communities. We raised money for officers that are killed in the line of duty, for military service members that are killed in the line of duty, support charities, and always try to tie in some kind of give back with the media aspect. But yeah, man, we're pretty diverse across the big strategic realm of our genre, which is survival.
No, I love that mobility stuff. Like, I mean, anything you put out, we've known each other for a long time. I'm not trying to, stroke you off. I'm saying, like, anything you put out is like, it's such a great product. And because Mike, and for those of you guys who are listening, Mike is such a articulate and thought out instructor when he's putting information out. It's a fucking fantastic block of instruction, because he's going to think about things that, even at a guy, when I say even at a guy at my level, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, whether you're taking a carbine or a pistol course, but the mobility stuff, it's a market differentiator, right? For you guys, I think in a big way, it fits directly into your brand. And then how much mobility stuff did you do in the last, we'll call it 20 years, man? I mean, like, just fucking swag a number.
It's crazy. I've never, and it partly, I want to protect it because I haven't realized, out of all the guys that come from our community, I don't realize they understand their full potential.
Right.
I don't think they realize how much exposure they have had in all the other realms outside of just physically shooting a gun on a flat range. And,
right.
My mission statement has always been, what it's been. And I said to myself and my team, if I'm on a flat range teaching carbine and pistol in 10 years, I have somehow messed up. And it's not because there's anything wrong with teaching firearms. It's just that there's so much diversification potential and communication and overlanding and everything.
Right.
And, we were overlanding without even understanding the term overlanding. In 04, we were, rolling around in chopped Land Rovers because we couldn't use GMVs because of the roads that we were operating on. And, my first combat rotation was 9 months in a detachment. And we literally lived underneath our Land Rovers that were chopped for war.
Right.
And then, you take the other countries like Libya, Yemen, Iraq, Pakistan, all these other countries. Every single one, it evolved around a mobility platform. And so the terminology I like to use is everyday mobility, and utilizing or looking at your vehicle as an extension of your rucksack.
Right.
Because more than likely, the average American spends in excess of 90 minutes a day in their vehicle.
Right.
And so when you look at your vehicle, if you don't have a med kit, if you don't have a potential go bag, if you don't have, the small things that will allow you to recover your vehicle when shit hits the fan, you're really messing up, because more than likely you're going to be in and around your vehicle. And the first thing you need to break contact is you need to be mobile. And if you can't do that on foot, and you have the opportunity to do it via your mobility platform or your vehicle, you should have it set up that way. So, for us, it was always an extension of a rucksack. We had our base load on our person, But then we just had the upgrade of that in, our speed balls, our go bags, our ammunition loadout, because it could carry that. And so I just want to change people's perspective on how they look at their vehicles. And you don't have to have a $50,000 tricked out 4Runner to have that mindset. You could have your Honda Civic, but have a go bag inside of it, have a med kit in it, and then just be prepared. And on top of all that shit, I mean, the bottom line is I love it. I mean, who doesn't love the mobility aspects of getting off-road, overlanding, and getting the fuck away from civilization?
I'm right there with you, man. Like it's like sexy as hell, even, and I was talking to one of my buddies about this. It was like, because I think people, and I hate to use the term prepper, because that's not like, I live in reality, and things can fucking unfold rapidly in reality. It's just being prepared and or understanding reality is a very difficult situation for a lot of people. But the psychology of that, when you shift over into that, tons of guys play fantasy football, which I'm not bagging on it. It's just not my game. Whereas for me, when I think about these things, and I'm like right eye to eye with you, my wife has her vehicle, and it's set up with medical gear and a few of the other things that we put in all of our vehicles, and it's common to all, by the way, right? So it's like the same gears in my truck, the same bags in my truck, same bags in her truck. It's the same across the board. And I'll bring my family out, and I've done this a few times where, I'll put on a medical course for my entire family. My daughter's 5 years old. My wife hasn't done a ton of medical stuff. So, we'll open up the med bags, we'll go through and we'll do like tourniquet drills and a few of these other things. I've got a 2-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old daughter, and my wife, obviously she's my age. But even understanding that and putting people in the right frame of mind, it's not about being scared. It's about, what's scary is not knowing what the fuck to do when you have a 5-year-old after you've been in a traffic accident and she's fucking bleeding out. That's scary. And it's not just the fact of thinking about it in the sense of being able to live in reality and being as prepared as you can psychologically. It's like you can start to think about these things and then use these skills in recreation too. Like I think one of the things that's really cool that you're doing with this mobility stuff is incorporating, shooting and mobility and preparedness. Like all those things are fucking cool to me, man. That's how I recreate, right? Like my imagination flows with this stuff. And it's like, I would much rather be into this and like researching med bags and holsters, mobility options, than like figuring out how many fucking touchdowns Joe Schmuckatelli did last weekend. Don't care, right? Don't care. And so I think it's fucking cool, man. And then your podcast is like kicking ass. I mean, how many of those are you guys putting out? One a week?
Yeah, we do one a week. That's the kind of the staple for us, is one a week.
And you guys are covering the gambit, right? I mean, as far as like preparedness and leadership and all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely. I've even gotten big into kind of like the neurological studies and understanding of psychological stress and or physiological stress, for that matter, because it's all relevant. And daily I am dumbfounded by the amount of lack of attention paid to just basic skill sets. I mean, we're all in America, so it's in a freedom. In freedom, we often get complacent when it comes to our routine and behaviors, and I have to check myself. I mean, even silly shit like our everyday carry mat. It's a fucking mouse pad. I mean, it's literally a mouse pad. But what I realized is what it does. It's like the stage or kit room at war.
Right.
It isolates all of your equipment in one place and gets your mind right. It's not just about the pre-combat inspections or you're press checking your gun. You're making sure your wallet, your tourniquet, your EDC carry gun is there. It puts you in the right state of mind and the right framework for if the worst case scenario kicks off. And so I'm just dumbfounded by the lack of paying attention to that. And the interesting thing in this genre that I've discovered is people are really interested once you start to bridge the gap of education and understanding, where they go, oh, wait, this isn't cool guy operator shit. This is like basic level soccer mom shit.
Yeah.
I mean, if I drive a car And, there's not over 9 million accidents a year
Yes.
in the United States. And a significant amount of people die in vehicle accidents that could have been prevented. And so when I look at like the basics of like carrying a tourniquet in your vehicle, it's like, why the fuck would you not pay $30 to have a cat tourniquet in your vehicle that could potentially save you or your kids' lives? Well, it's more than likely because you're complacent, or you just haven't even had a realm of understanding of what happens when you don't. And what I tell people is, I don't give a shit. If you don't want to listen to me, that's completely fine. I hope you listen to somebody, but the bottom line is, if you don't listen and then the worst case does happen, then you're just dead. And it's no harm, no foul. The only reason I want to educate you is because I want you to think about the worst case scenario. And in the best country in the world, where freedom will make you a little complacent, because that's the convenience of our pattern of life in America.
And it's so easy too. Like you're speaking my language, which is like, it's so easy in the States to get complacent, and I have to continue to put myself back into that mindset. Every month or so, I've got to I do like an assessment, a total fucking overhaul. And like, literally I'm like, okay, what am I forgetting? All right, I didn't carry my gun for like 3 days. Why? What the fuck is wrong with me? And so then I started rebuilding stuff where it's like, I can't, like for instance, I carry a gun in a briefcase most of the time, not my belt line, because, I'm up and down all day long, but I carry my briefcase to the office every day. So for me, what'll happen is I'll take my gun out, because I'm taking my briefcase on a flight, right? So I'll take my gun out and I'll put it in my safe at home. I'll go on a flight, come back, and I'll forget it for 2 or 3 days or whatever it is. Like, that's just completely unsat. But I do it, and I'm admitting on our podcast that I do it. So then I go back and I'm like, all right, I got to pre-build some stuff in here so I don't forget how to do that. And then I went. It's funny because I put some soft armor. I've been carrying soft armor in my briefcase for 4 years, and I say it's my briefcase, my bag that I carry every day. And then I got everything else that I need in there, tourniquets and soft armor and everything else. It's just one sheet. But it's like, I'm not staying to play in a gunfight, right? I'm looking to, if I got, kids and or anything else, and I just need to break contact and move out. Like, I have a Glock 43 and one layer of soft armor that I know that at least it's there 90% of the time, right?
Yeah.
But I carry that 3A with me all times because I know at least it's there, and I never forget it. You can move through security with it. It's not an issue. It's been in my briefcase or multiple briefcases now for 4 years. And then I've upgraded it too. So if something lighter and better comes out, then I'll put that panel in there. But never without tourniquet, never without armor, never without a few of these things. I'm never without those. And then talking to my wife, because she came from a life where she never thought about those things. So then, and then you probably understand this, and a lot of listeners will understand that. It's like, you can't just full front approach, assault your family with the intensity of like, you're all going to die either. Cause that'll like scare your kids. And like, it's just like, you got to come at it with like, hey guys, let's play a game, right? And then we have multiple tourniquets. So, cause multiple tourniquets solve multiple solutions for different types of limbs, so we have a dog, for instance, and we have 2, pediatrics and then 2 adults. Like, we've got to have multiple means of medication, to stop the bleeding, but you can't just approach that information like, well, honey, if your mommy gets T-boned and a piece of metal comes through this door and rips your arm off, like, this is going to save your life. Like, this is going to fucking scare the shit out of your kids. So it's also putting out information. And I like that where, I'll teach the family and I'll put it out, but it reminds me too. So it's not just like I'm teaching the kids. It's like, no, man, I got to have this reminder, put myself back in this mindset, then convey some of this information that I've just been able to, pick up in 20 years and throw it in a bag. That's why that's why I like talking to guys like you, because you spend so much more time thinking about this because it's part of your business. I mean, it is your business. So talking to guys like you and then listening to your podcast and scrubbing your blog, because your blog's really good too, by the way, for those of you guys, man. Like it's fucking really good. I'm a huge fan of what you guys got going on. We've exceeded like our hour on the airways, so I want to be super conscious of your time. But you know, you've got the blog, you've got your podcast. Where can everybody find you, man?
So on, philcraftsurvival.com is the mainstay for everything, and then you can be slivered off into everything else we got going on. My blog is soft blog. It's sofblog.com, and then social media on Instagram primarily is our source. It's at philcraftsurvival. We obviously have at philcraftmobility, at philcraftsurvivalfit, a whole bunch of other stuff going on. Our podcast is on iTunes and SoundCloud, and it's the Philcraft Survival Podcast.
Yeah, and to all you guys out there, like I've known Mike for so long, like we were talking about, just an amazing guy, like has an incredible amount of information. And the great thing about Mike is his experience is articulated in such a fantastic package in multiple modules of information. So whether that's a course or a podcast or a blog, what you're doing is fucking cool, man. I love what you're doing for the community. I love the brand. I'm hoping that I can get you back every few months, and so we can talk some survival shit, maybe talk some more shop. But can't thank you enough for being on the show, dude. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks, brother. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and likewise. I mean, it's awesome to be talking to a buddy who's done what you've done, and then knowing you prior to everything going down, and knowing despite the successes and everything else, you're still the same team guy, and proud of what you guys are doing, and appreciate having me on the podcast.
Anytime, man. You got an open invite. Anytime you guys got something going on, I think it'd be cool. We should do a caveat. We should do some article on your mobility course, because like that's such a fucking cool thing, dude. Like I'm like, I want, if I had more time, there's that excuse, like that would be the first course that I would go to. I'd go to one of your courses and go to your mobility course. I would go there just to be the student and be like, all right, let me learn from Mike.
It's fun, man. They're the funnest courses because everybody is like-minded and has their big, sexy rigs, and everybody's, super motivated. Those are my favorite ones, man.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to buy like an old shitty, like $500 Subaru and just show up one day and be like, yeah, this is my car, Meg. This is what I do. This is my daily driver, bro.
Why not? That's your go rig, man. You do a budget build.
It's my go rig. All right, brother. I appreciate it. I'm Evan Hafer. This is Mike from Philcraft Survival. Thanks a lot, brother. We're out.
Thanks, guys.